Hello, and thank you for joining tonight's DFA live call with Van Jones. Tonight, Van Jones will discuss his experience covering the 2016 election for CNN, talk about the state of the progressive movement, and he'll take questions from DFA members across the country. Right now, DFA members are joining this call, and we're going to get started in just a few minutes, so please stay on the line. Hello, and thank you for joining tonight's DFA live call with Van Jones. Tonight, Van Jones will discuss his experiences covering the 2016 election for CNN. He's going to talk about the state of the progressive movement, and he'll take questions from DFA members across the country. Now, right now, DFA members are joining this call, so we're going to get started in just a few minutes. Please stay on the line. Hello, and thank you for joining tonight's DFA live call with Van Jones. Tonight, Van Jones will discuss his experience covering the 2016 election for CNN. He's going to talk about the state of the progressive movement and the impact Bernie's had, and he'll take questions from DFA members across the country. Now, right now, DFA members are joining this call, so we're going to get started in just a minute while we wait for everybody to get on the line. So please, just hang on. Okay, let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to the call. My name is Charles Chamberlain, and I'm the Executive Director of Democracy for America. We're honored to be joined tonight by Van Jones and DFA Chair Jim Dean for what promises to be a fantastic conversation. Now, before I bring Van on the call, I want to make sure you know he'd love to take your questions tonight. If you'd like to ask Van a question during the call, please press 0 on your phone, and you'll be connected with a DFA staff member. Again, please press 0 right now if you'd like to ask a question of Van Jones. Also, if you're listening to this call on our website at democracyforamerica.com/live, you can also submit a question through the live web stream. With that, I think our chair, Jim Dean, is on the call. Jim, are you there? Uh-oh, sounds like Jim may not have made it. So instead, I'm going to do his part and say thank you for joining us tonight, and thank you, Van, for being here. You know, we tend to avoid watching too much television, but when I switched over to CNN, I was always comforted to see Van Jones on a panel because I know that there will be at least one thoughtful progressive voice. Van Jones, throughout this primary season, has nailed it, doing a great job of keeping a balanced perspective against all odds. At DFA, we like to talk about fighters and truth tellers, and I think no better way to describe Van Jones than to say he's a fighter and a truth teller. From his work in the White House to the numerous incredible organizations he has founded, including Color of Change, Dream Corps, and Rebuild the Dream, to his expert analysis. So I'm thrilled to hear what he has to say at this critical juncture. Van, I want to welcome you to the call.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. Can you hear my voice?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Well, it's an honor to be here. You know, I have a obviously huge admiration for DFA, one of our great progressive organizations at the forefront. Also, great respect for your courage in endorsing Bernie Sanders. I didn't endorse anybody, and I never tried to speak for Sanders and Sanders supporters, but I tried to speak up for Sanders and Sanders supporters often because it was very, very clear to me that the reluctance of the mainstream media to just face reality that this revolution was happening was just sometimes appalling. And like I said, I was never speaking for Bernie, but I was proud to speak up for Bernie and for the revolution.
Well, you did a fantastic job, and I totally agree. It's amazing how many people and how many of the different commentators on these shows acted like it didn't exist or acted like Bernie wasn't even there or the campaign was over long before it was actually over. You know, what impact do you think Bernie Sanders has had on this election, and where do you see the political revolution going next?
Well, I think it's been explosive in that for a very long time I think that people who were strong on the left with either ideas that were anti-capitalist or alternative to capitalist, or very strong reform ideas for capitalism, I think felt that there was no place in American life, in American society, and for a candidate who went straight after the worst of the 1% and straight after the worst of this economic system, to get not 2% or 3% or 5%, maybe he'd do a little bit better than Kucinich, maybe a little bit worse, but to be showing up next month with 42%, 42 or 43% of the entire Democratic Party delegation, that's a watershed moment. And it doesn't listen, there are going to be a lot of these platform fights. I'm less enamored with the platform fights because I worked in the White House for 6 months. It wasn't long, but it was long enough for me to notice that at no time during the entire time we were there did we ever look at the platform. Nobody woke up and said, hey, well, what are we going to do? Well, what does the platform say? People, once they're in the White House, they do what the politics allow them to do. If we keep building a progressive alternative to all this nonsense, the politics will be dictated to the White House. Not the platform to the party, but the politics to the White House. And I think that's what progressives need to be focused on.
Now, don't you think that part of the idea behind the platform fight, though, is to actually make sure that we're setting what that politics is, sort of trying to put it in stone? I mean, certainly the platform doesn't matter. Nobody actually cares or pays attention to it as far as, a commitment that they have to run on it. But when you think about the fact that we've got 42% of the party that we're representing at least, when we get it into the platform, doesn't it make it more clear what we believe the future of the Democratic Party should look like?
Well, look, absolutely. I think platform fights are clarifying. I think that they are energizing. And, frankly, 4 years ago, 8 years ago, you couldn't even get criminal justice reform into the Democratic Party platform. You couldn't even say the words. That's been completely changed by, say, Black Lives Matter. The Dreamers have had a huge impact. The Fight for 15 has had a huge impact. I wish that Idle No More, the movement on the Native American reservations, had a bigger impact, but that may be coming. Occupy has had a huge impact. Obviously, everything that Bernie has been saying and Elizabeth Warren has been saying has had a huge impact, and that should be reflected, and it will be reflected to a limited extent in this party platform. The reality is, I think that Hillary Clinton is trying to reach out. She's bowing to some pressures. But sometimes I feel like the Sanders people and the Clinton people are talking past each other, in that Hillary Clinton continues to make policy concessions, whether it's on Social Security or something else. She's holding her ground on some policy issues, but her main way of reaching out is, here's some policies you might like a little bit better. But I think for a lot of Sanders people, policy matters, but process also matters. And I think for from the Sanders people, there's a feeling, hey, hold on a second. The DNC chair should be fair. The DNC shouldn't be biased. Big money shouldn't dominate, and there shouldn't be hanky-panky at the voting booth. And I don't want to hear about your policies until you tell me something about the process. It's often like you're getting a spat with your loved one, and you give them flowers, and what they want is an apology. And so I think that that's kind of where we are in this attempt to put things together. I think there's been too much from the Clinton people that, we fell into line in 2008, and so you guys have to fall into line and shut up in 2016. And I think that what the Clinton people sometimes miss is that there was zero ideological difference between an Obama and a Hillary Clinton. I mean, that's just basically two different. That's like vanilla ice cream or chocolate ice cream. You're still getting ice cream. With Bernie and with Hillary, that's corn dogs and caviar. I mean, those are two very different temperaments and worldviews. And you can say, oh, well, they voted together 93% of the time, but that's because you can only vote on so much stuff. The stuff that they would have voted on differently never came to a vote at all. So there's an ideological gap to be overcome there. There's some policy gaps to be overcome there. There's some process heartburn to be overcome there. And I still don't think that the Clinton team has done enough to reach out. That said, I think for the left for us to condition our fight against Trump on whatever the Clintons do or don't do, or frankly whatever the DNC does or doesn't do, or what the Democrats do or don't do, I think is an error. I think that Trump represents such a tremendous danger such as I've never seen before, that the left has an independent obligation to stop him. I think progressives should beat bigots. Bigots should be stopped from grabbing power, regardless of the flaws of the alternative. And whatever systemic racism the Clintons may have trafficked in the 90s and even today, it does not compare. If you have a Muslim child in this country, it does not compare. You are in a nightmare every day. If you are Latino, Mexican American, you are living a nightmare that gets worse and worse every day that he continues to be neck and neck with Hillary Clinton in the polls. And we have a responsibility, not to the Democrats, but to the people to stop this guy.
I think that's really, really critically important. And I want to thank you, Van, for cutting and pivoting straight to that from this conversation, because I certainly agree, policy and process matter, and it's vitally important that we continue to fight for that as we move ahead. But at the end of the day, defeating Trump is critical. Before we get to the next question, I do want to make sure that DFA members across the country know how they can ask their questions. The way to do it is by pressing 0. If you press 0 now, you'll enter the question queue. You'll talk with a DFA representative, one of our awesome volunteers or staff members, who will discuss your question with you and get you into the queue. You can also leave your question at democracyforamerica.com/live if you're watching it on the web stream. With that in mind, I want to actually go to a first question that is coming from caller Alice in New Jersey. Alice, are you there?
I am.
Excellent. Why don't you ask your question?
Thrilled to be here. Very congratulatory of Van Jones for doing something so breakthrough. This is democracy with a small and a large D, and to him, all kudos for allowing us to really have a voice, because I'm speaking now. I'm not just typing it on my laptop. My question is, how do the media, the political talking heads, and we constituents stop joking about Donald Trump? I think in our fear and our shock with his stance, his bigotry, his demagoguery, there is especially on the cable shows, to kind of goof off and say, oh, he's a little bit this, and oh, he did it again. This is our country possibly sliding into a Hitler-esque, and I know that's a terribly overstated, but this time it's true. What do we do to help the media not, in its reaction to his outrageousness, treat him like a political joke? Because he is a political disaster already. Our country can't afford to treat him as a political joke, but I see too much of it, and that's my question.
Sure. Well, I want to be very clear. Donald Trump not only can be elected president, by my reading, he is likely to become the president of the United States. And you should be horrified at that. Let me just walk through. Everybody keeps, oh, well, no, there's no way. He can't win. He's a joke. He's going to blow himself up. His policies are terrible. His hair is bad. It's just all this stuff, and it's complete garbage. First of all, let's just be very clear. Celebrities tend to win elections in the United States. Let's just, Jesse Ventura came up 7 points the day of and became governor in Minnesota. Arnold Schwarzenegger destroyed the entire field twice, not because he was, particularly well-versed in policy. Remember, Arnold Schwarzenegger, if you're from California, you'd ask Arnold Schwarzenegger a question, what are you going to do about tax policy? And he'd say, I love California. And then you say, well, okay, well, what about education policy? I love California. And he became the governor. Sonny Bono, any worthless person who's a celebrity could be elected in this country. Captain Crunch could be elected. I've heard of that guy. I'll check the box. So please don't underestimate that, number one. Number two, he has not spent any money. He's had a terrible 3 and now 4 weeks. Hillary Clinton has been running a great campaign, technically. She's spending money. And they are neck and neck in the swing states today. Neck and neck. in the swing states. So what will happen if he actually spends money and sticks to his core theme of trade and immigration and Hillary's corruption? You can imagine a scenario in which they're neck and neck, and then, like most celebrities, he kicks up a point or two or three or four or five. There are black swan events that can happen. If you have a major terrorist attack, not just a shoot-'em-up kind, but an even bigger kind. If you have an economic recession. If it turns out that Putin has Hillary Clinton's server. There are all kinds of things that can happen in the mix here that would make it very, very hard. And yet, Democrats and progressives are fighting less hard against Donald Trump than they fought against Romney. Now, at least Romney wasn't a psychopath. At least Romney wasn't a bigot. I mean, Romney just shouldn't have been president of the United States, but people fought passionately to stop Romney, and people are being lackadaisical about stopping Trump. People say, well, there's no way, Van, the math doesn't work out. What are you talking about? He's pissed off all the Latinos. He can't possibly win. Okay, fine. What does that actually take off the board from the mathematical point of view? It takes Florida off the board. That is a big deal. It takes Nevada off the board. That's a big deal. It takes Colorado off the board. Those are big, big deals, swing states. But losing the Sun Belt does not mean he can't win the presidency, because he can still run right up the Rust Belt. If he loses Florida, Colorado, and Nevada, but he wins Virginia and North Carolina, and there's no reason to think he can't win Virginia and North Carolina, and then he goes up to Ohio, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, the Rust Belt, and uniquely among Republicans goes up there and says, NAFTA took your jobs away. Hillary Clinton's husband and Hillary Clinton were for NAFTA. I'm going to tear NAFTA up, number one. Number two, I'm going to seal the border. So the jobs that come back, you can get them, and these other folks can't get them. And number three, too many of y'all black folk up here in here have been poor too long. I'm rich, give me a chance. If you don't think that a message like that could break through in the Rust Belt, all three of those states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Ohio, either have or have had Republican governors recently. All of them. All of them are in horrible economic shape. All of them. And all of them know NAFTA and equals Clinton and Clinton equals NAFTA. All of them. So we're sitting here laughing and chuckling and making little jokes and retweeting little funnies, and there is a gun aimed at the head of the American people and our future. Because anybody that tells you that Trump would not be any worse than Hillary Clinton, you tell that to a Muslim kid. Tell that to a Mexican-American family, number one. Where's our obligation for solidarity? But much more importantly, you've never had an election like this ever. Never, not one time ever, has on one day the presidency, all three branches of government, the presidency is on the line on one day in November. The Senate is on the line in one day in November. The House is on the line in one day in November. And because of the state of the Supreme Court, explicitly now, the fate of the Supreme Court is on the line in one day in November. All three branches of government up for grabs, plus the character of the country. How can you raise children in America with Trump as president? How can you tell children not to be bullies, not to be mean-spirited, not to make fun of people when the president of the United States got to be elected by doing that? How can you tell children not to be bigots, not to judge people by the color of their skin or how they pray or what they look like, when the President of the United States got to the highest office in the land doing exactly that? You have the entire character, and if he wins, please be clear, he may not do all the crazy stuff that he said he's going to do, but he's going to try to do a bunch of it, and you will have a Republican Congress that will get in bed with him, and you will have a bad bill every week coming down the pike. And there's not one thing you're going to be able to do but to protest and try to stop bad bill after bad bill after bad bill for 4 years. All forward progress will come to a stop, minimally. All forward progress will come to a stop. And you will have one of the most vindictive, psychopathic leaders on planet Earth with the IRS in his hands day one, the FBI in his hands day one, the CIA, the NSA, the Pentagon in his hands day one, This is a man who will not allow a silent protest from a single Muslim woman who just stood up silently with a sign that said, "We come in peace." That's all she did. Don't talk about the disruptions. The first thing that happened at a Trump rally, don't forget this, an individual Muslim woman stood up holding quietly a sign that says, "We come in peace." He had her thrown out, and they yelled and cursed at her and threw all kind of vitriol at a single, but this man brooks no dissent, and he will have all those agencies in his back pocket the day one before he goes to Congress to give you a horror show for the Supreme Court and rolls back Obamacare and everything else. So I say this to say I am shocked at the complacency and smugness of the left. This is, for the first time in your life, you have a true right-wing populist demagogue with the nomination of a major party going for power on the basis of some economic populism, which you may like, but racial demagoguery, which should terrify you, and we have not been fighting back, and we are not preparing our people to fight back. And Brexit shows you that crazy ideas can break through if there's a mix of some good stuff and some racial demagoguery and smugness on the part of liberals who sit down while the crazy stand up. You can get Brexit and you can get Donald Trump.
This point you made, first of all, thank you, Alice, so much for that question. And this point that you're making, Van, I don't think it could be made loud enough, hard enough, strong enough. I've had people say that if we elect Hillary, we're going to have to fight her at every turn. And yes. I think there's some truth to that. I think as progressive Democrats, I think there are going to be some fights that we're going to have with Hillary over, possible economic policy and other issues foreign policy as we move along. But the difference between the kind of fights that we have to undertake with Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, it's not even close. What would be another analogy? You were going before about corn dogs and caviar. This is more like rancid meat versus food you can actually eat. It doesn't make any sense that we could sit back and try to equate the two as being the same. At least that's what I think.
But it's deeper than that. But I know you got one more question to get you, but it's deeper than that.
Please.
Look, I'm old enough now. I was around in the 1990s. And I remember fighting against the Clintons on NAFTA in the 1990s. I remember fighting against the Clintons on mass incarceration, criminal justice bill, welfare repeal, and other stuff in the 1990s. And it was very frustrating. And we got so frustrated that we kind of slumped off. And then all of a sudden you had George W. Bush. And we went from having some domestic policy stuff that we didn't like to having a disastrous war that has destabilized the world and resulted in the bankruptcy of a nation and the death of hundreds of thousands, not millions of people. So yes, we will be fighting the Clintons on stuff we care about. But to underscore the difference, that difference is tremendous. And the other thing I want to say is simply this: I can remember when we didn't expect the president to be the Messiah. This whole Obama effect, where the president's you got to be in love with the president, and the president's got to be the hero for your children, and all that time. Look, to me, this is very simple. Very simple. Pick your piñata. Pick your piñata. Whoever the president is, if you're progressive, you're going to have to fight him. But I got kids, and if you pick a piñata that's too hard and too high, and you can't hit it hard, you don't get any candy out at all. You got to pick a piñata that's low enough that you can hit it, and that's soft enough you can knock something out of it. A Hillary Clinton White House, the progressives can put tremendous pressure on. There could be Elizabeth Warren can threaten a primary challenge. I mean, there's tremendous pressure you can put. You have weaponry to bring to bear on a Hillary Clinton White House that you do not have to bring to bear on a Trump White House. In fact, you put 100,000 people in front of the White House against Donald Trump, and he will be happy. He loves to have the left protest him. Hillary Clinton would be very, very worried. So let's just be clear. We're not voting for a Messiah. This movement, the revolution as you guys call it, this movement is going to have to keep fighting and pushing and fighting and pushing against Democrats and Republicans and some Green Party people maybe and some Libertarians. Whoever they put up there, we're going to have to push. But for Christ's sakes, can we have enough sense to to put a target up there that we can actually push against effectively, rather than creating a situation where we're going to be on strategic defensive for at least 4 years on every single thing, including the Supreme Court. Roe v. Wade, gone. Citizens United, law forever. The Voting Rights Act, gone, because we got light and funny and dismissive and smug when we should have stood up and got strong and smart and stood together.
Well said. And I think that leads in really well to the next question we have from Jeff in California. Jeff, you there?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. Please ask your question. Van Jones.
Yes, hi, Van. Given the discussion you're just having about the vulnerabilities that Trump is going to go after Secretary Clinton on, what would you advise the Secretary's campaign to do?
Well, I'm not in the habit of advising any of these folks. But I do think that there's got to be an interesting combination here, I think, from the Clintons. Other people can raise other issues. She's completely collapsed in a way on globalization in a way that actually doesn't make a ton of sense. She can't pretend that she doesn't like any trade deals. There have been some upsides. I mean, I think she should say, look, there have been some upsides here. You're paying less than you would have paid for some items that are important to you. So there have been some upsides. The problem is we did not manage the downsides, and we made some mistakes. And I am committed to making sure that going forward we fix what needs to get fixed. But in order to fix it, you got to have somebody who knows how to make the government work. Part of the problem is this whole myth that a celebrity real estate agent can come in and make the United States government work better needs to be attacked a lot more effectively. I will say this, I'm not going to hire a dentist to do heart surgery. There is no relationship. I've worked in the White House, not for long, but long enough to know. There's no relationship between what a CEO can do and what a president can do. A CEO can fire people. The president can't fire the Senate. The CEO can rearrange and reorder the business. The president can't reorder the Supreme Court or the House of Representatives. There's a completely different set of tools available to a CEO that are 100% absent under our Constitution. And so I think that she needs to do a better job of explaining that all the stuff he's promising to do, it's all fictional. And but honestly, I'm less interested in what the Clintons can do and should do. I'm much more interested in what progressives can do and should do, what the left can do and should do. I think we have a responsibility to the country and to the kids in this country and to the planet to get out there and fight independently and to raise, and especially those of you who have organizations like DFA, to raise your own slogans, to raise your own banner, and to get on a fighting footing, not only to stop Trump, but then to make sure that Hillary Clinton does better than she would otherwise. And so my argument is never with the Clintons. They're going to spend a bunch of money on a bunch of ads, and I'm sure some of them will be good, some of them won't. She's got to give a bunch of speeches. I'm sure some will be good, some won't. But this is the first time that you have, a fascist on the ballot, and he's a proto-fascist demagogue on the ballot in your lifetime, in your country, the whole world watching, and the first time you have a true left movement, a true anti-capitalist or at least non-capitalist movement that put millions of people, not just in the streets, but in the voting booths. The responsibility to that movement to keep it on a militant footing, to recognize the main enemy right now is fascism, but as soon as that's defeated, there will be other fights to be had. That's the main responsibility of a left in a situation like this, and I restrict my counsel to my fellow progressives.
Excellent. I think that makes a lot of sense. Thanks a lot for that question. I think especially with your role in the media itself, being on CNN so much, we've got a great question from Mona White in California. Mona, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. Why don't you ask your question?
Okay. I really am frustrated to see him on TV all the time, CNN, whatever I watch, he is. And I wanted to know if there's any way that we can have the media not give him all this free airtime. and concentrate on all the nasty stuff and this fascism stuff, and actually put somebody on there that's talking with plans to do, just more positive. Because I am afraid that we're going to end up with World War III.
There is a way. Yes, there absolutely is a way to get Trump off the air, and the way to get Trump off the air is to beat him in all 50 states in November. That's the only way. The mainstream media, frankly, the alternative media, the right-wing media, all the media is caught up in this, for him or against him frenzy, and that will continue. So, trying to wish that the mainstream media is going to function differently than it has, I don't think is a wish worth wasting. The way to get these people off the air is to crush them, is to defeat them, is to turn this whole nightmare into a lesson learned for generations, that if you traffic in this kind of hatred and vitriol and irresponsible, reckless bigotry, and if you play with the economic pain of the country in this way, you will go down to a historic, embarrassing, humiliating defeat, which we can deliver to him if we will. The problem is right now we're not doing anything that remotely looks like we plan to. Whatever you thought you were going to do this fall, you should not do that unless it involves doing lots of house parties to raise money, phone banking into the swing states, going to the swing states. Let's not forget, most of the people on this call have tremendous skills. Even just leading a meeting is a skill not available to many people. We should be using every resource that we have, straining every sinew. We should have a no regrets policy. And if we destroy this charlatan's political stunt, if we force the Republicans to eat the stew they've been cooking up for at least 8 years, if not 40, and make them gag on it, then guess what? People are not going to do this. But you've got a danger, and it's not just Donald Trump. Throughout the West now, you have the rise of a dirty right. Not a clean right. I don't like the right, but, I can have a reasonable debate with a Paul Ryan. He's not going to traffic directly in violence and racial scapegoating. But now you've got not a clean right, but a dirty right that traffics in violence, that traffics in racial demagoguery, that is wholly irresponsible, and it's not just Trump. It's all across the West. And that was a big part, not the only factor, but a big factor in Brexit, and it is the decisive factor in Trump. And the only way to beat him is to beat him. He's not going to beat himself. There's not some one tweet that's going to blow him up. That's all a fantasy. These tweets, this whole strategy has played to his benefit. Social media, the social media era is totally different than any other media era. FDR understood radio, and he was able to dominate. JFK understood television. He was able to dominate when that was new. Obama understood the Internet and was able to dominate with online fundraising and viral videos when that was new. Trump is the social media candidate. He's a Twitter candidate. And he's also the reality television candidate. Being the villain on reality TV gets you bigger ratings. Insulting people on Twitter doesn't get you fewer followers. It gets you more followers. All the things that he's doing that you think are against the rules are actually following the rules of the new media system. But we have to say there's a bigger system than the media system. It's called the democratic system. It's called the system of people who are trying to make the country work, and we've got to defeat him. And he's not going to defeat himself. And our feeling, frustrated with seeing him, you'll see him every day for the next 4 to 8 years if we don't beat him in November.
Thank you so much for that question, Mona. While I think you're, making a great case in a lot of ways, I'm definitely seeing questions come in from DFA members around the country, and while they're listening to you, they're also skeptical. And I think Todd Holcomb from Arizona has a really good question that's very specific that I think really fits where a lot of progressives are at. Todd, are you on the call?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Great. Why don't you ask your question?
Thank you. Hi, Van. So
Hi.
here's my question. I'm going to cut to the chase.
Good.
When you look at the percentage turnout last time around in 2012 and in 2008, I realize that they're not exactly stellar, with being like 50, low 50 percentile. But when you look at the overall bases of the white male vote that really is the supporting class for Trump to be elected, and you look at the female vote and Hispanic vote and the black vote, how is it that dumbass white guys are going to be that much in control by numbers when his dispopularity numbers are higher than even Clinton's supporting numbers? So in other words, even if we only had a 50% turnout like we've had in the past, how are you going to account for the fact that about 70% of those people won't vote for Trump, and you're only going to get maybe a swing vote of 25 to 30% that will? So how is that gap going to be made up the way you've described?
Look, a couple of things. First of all, the numbers that we have right now are, pre-convention, pre-debate, and pre-whatever Black Swan October surprises are potentially in the works. So there has been a swing this big in the past. It was Dukakis versus George H.W. Bush. It would take a big swing, but listen, people have been. I had this conversation with James Carville and others, and they are very smug and they are very comfortable with their numbers, and they say it can never happen. You know what? Welcome to never. You are living in never. The same people were saying that he could never get the nomination. The same people were largely saying that Brexit couldn't pass. And we have to be aggressive. Listen, fine, if you think he's going to be defeated by demography and tweets, then great. Let's make sure he's defeated in all 50 states, okay? Just hedge the bet. But he's not going to be defeated just by democracy and tweets, because there is a great deal of pain out there, and there's a great deal of volatility out there, and things can happen in a debate, things can happen at a convention, things can happen on the nightly news that move the needle. So we need a very big firewall against this guy. I cannot tell you, I've spent night after night after night explaining to people that they were underestimating Trump, and they've had the smartest people in the country, from Nate Silver and all the rest of them, come out there and explain what an idiot I was, and he won night after night after night. And sure, you say it's a different thing because it's a general election, but I'm telling you, there is a level of pain out there. People are sitting on a white-hot stove all across the country. It's an anti-establishment year, not just in the United States, but across the West. And Hillary Clinton, for all her great gifts, is seen as the embodiment of the establishment. That makes her a very, very easy target. Yes, the numbers right now look great, and people are going to sleep. That's what happened with Brexit. That's what happened in the UK. I'm begging you. Listen, a year from now, my only request to you, some people say, oh, look at my numbers, look at my numbers. Just please have a no regrets policy for the next 4 months. Just say, look, even if it's impossible, I don't want to, if there's a 20% chance, that's too big a chance for me. If there's a 10% chance, too big a chance for me. I don't want to be sitting here a year from now saying, I wish I had done X. I wish I had done Y. I wish I had done more of this. I wish I had done less of that. Because how horrible you're going to feel, in the middle of November, if you feel like there was one thing you didn't do that you could have done, is not worth the comfort you're going to feel relying on numbers and polls and predictions that in situations like this have proven to be very inaccurate.
When you think about, thank you so much for that question, Todd, and Van for that answer. When you think about, how many new voters that Bernie has brought in to both the Democratic Party, but even just re-engaged back into the political process, or millennials that maybe weren't even registered before, or, just basic disenfranchisement. One of the things that I think has really been the attention has been called to by Steve Phillips' book, and Brown is the New White, is that we've got a system in the past that has been built on this mythical white swing voter and it so regularly fails to engage communities of color and new voters that have been brought into the system. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on Steve's analysis as to whether or not is the answer for us to go for the hardcore Democrats and get them out so that we can win in November, or do we need to reach a broader electorate? I mean, do we need to try to reach to these Republicans that might be disenfranchised by Trump and don't want to do Trump, or should we be focusing more on the base? What are your thoughts on that kind of political strategy?
Well, I think that Steve's, if people have not gotten the book, Brown is the New White, I'd encourage you to whip out your cell phone, do whatever you need to do, and get it, because it's very, very revealing. And one set of numbers that I want to underscore is that the African American community uniquely inside the Democratic coalition, inside the so-called Obama coalition, is expected to give 92% of our vote to the Democrats. Not 50%, not 60%, not 70, not 80, not 90, 92% of our vote to the Democrats for them to win the presidency. No other part of the coalition is expected to do that. Single white women are not, Latinos are not, nobody is expected to do that. But we have to do that. If we don't do that, the Republicans win. If any Republican can get 15% of the black vote, is going to be president of the United States. George W. Bush got about 12, 13%. So, all else being equal, it's 3 out of 20 black folks vote for Trump. If nothing else changes, he's president of the United States. So, is there a comparable level of investment in the black community, given the black community's investment in the Democratic Party? And what you see is the answer is a shocking no. The Democratic Party, when it spends its money on vendors, pollsters, ad buys, advertising, makers, digital, turnout, most of that money, 95+% of it, goes to firms that are owned by white males, or owned by white folks, basically. I don't know about the male part, but
no, it's males.
Is it white males?
It's generally white males. Yep.
Yeah. So the percentage of investment for African American owned firms and Latino, that's very, very small. And so then the strategies wind up being kind of very skewed and lopsided. So you wind up having to walk around and door knock with materials that don't necessarily work or reflect. It doesn't work. It's not fair. And if Hillary Clinton's main argument against Trump is that Trump's a bigot and she's not, racial fairness needs to start at home. At what point can women and people of color get any access to the billions of dollars being raised in these campaigns? Now, I raise that because many of you on this call have more influence than the average activist on the way that campaigns happen and are run. And I think that not just in this campaign, but all the way down the ballot, people need to start asking questions about gender fairness and racial fairness. You mean Ava DuVernay or Spike Lee can't make a video? Let's not forget, in 2008, the best video that was made was will.i.am's video, the Yes We Can video. That wasn't even a campaign video. That was just an African-American hip-hop guy making a video. That thing has been seen multiple millions of times. He did it for free for that campaign, and there's plenty of talented people that could do more, but they're not allowed to. So I think that's an issue.
Yeah, that's a great point. Spike Lee's ad, though, for Bernie Sanders was pretty fantastic. I don't know if you saw it, but that was pretty great, speaking of Spike Lee. Thinking along the lines of what you're talking about, and not just talking about sort of what I would call as the low-hanging fruit to go after Trump on his bigotry, because it's so obvious and it's so right there and it's so offensive. But like you said, if we're not engaging in a positive fashion, how much does that connect? But at the same time, the whole issue with Trump is it has a huge the advantage theoretically he has on trade. So we've got Deborah in New Mexico who has a question on that. Deborah, are you there?
I am here. Hi, and thank you so much, Van, and thank you, DFA. My issue what I'm really deeply concerned about is that, when Trump beat the field of Republicans, he didn't really have a platform, but he's very shrewd, and what he did was see what is it about Bernie that was drawing such immense excitement. And I think he stole a whole chunk of Bernie's platform whole cloth, namely the trade issues, rebuilding the infrastructure, et cetera, to his great benefit. And he has even brought some Bernie people over with that rhetoric, which, of course, he has no intention of fulfilling any more than Hillary does because she's already backpedaling on TPP. So my question is, how do we, because if Hillary pivots to the center, which she's already doing, she's already lost this election. She has lost this election by pivoting center and going backwards on things like trade, TPP, et cetera.
So, Deborah, that seems great. I mean, the question she's asking basically is that if Trump has an advantage in the Midwest due to his anti-trade views, and Clinton is moderate or even starts to backtrack on any of that, what do we do? How do we convince them to stay on the message, the bold, progressive, populist message that works? Van?
I'm sorry. I don't have a good crystal ball for what will make the Clinton campaign do what we want them to do. I just don't. And I think that the reality is she has her set of advisors. Some of them are very, very smart and very, very good, and they have their read on the numbers and they have their read on their polling data and their focus group stuff. And, they may be right. But I think that she's got serious vulnerabilities in these areas and on some of these topics. But the reality is that we may not share her view on economics, but I think we do share her view on bigotry and demagoguery. And there is something. Listen. We're gonna have to keep fighting and pushing, and frankly, we've been fighting and pushing as progressives and pushing this conversation forward from before Occupy to now, and we're winning. We're winning that fight. We're winning people over. Hillary Clinton has to say things in 2016 that you couldn't break breath to say in 2004, and even Dennis Kucinich couldn't say some of the stuff that she says now because we're winning. So what I would say is that continuing to have progressives march at the head of the fight to stop Trump is the most important thing. People keep asking, how can we get Hillary Clinton to do something? I don't know that is a good use of our time. I still don't see us getting our own base fully engaged. And I see a lot of people, and I tell you, it's very frustrating to me, people clinging to these fake polls and statistics that, he's so unpopular with this group and that group, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of people are not going to even think about this stuff seriously until 2 weeks before the election or 1 week. And there'll be some people who literally will be undecided 2 days before the election. And so the one thing we have control over is whether or not progressives are fired up and whether or not progressives are relying on polling data, expecting demographics and social media to defeat Trump for them. And my main, plea with every progressive, I was in San Francisco last night begging progressives, let's have a no regrets policy. Let's fight as if a fascist could take over the government, because the downside of letting that happen are very, very impossible for us to describe.
All right, thank you, Deborah, and thank you, Van. I think we have one last question that we should take here that I think is exactly in the path here what we're looking for. EJ in Santa Barbara, are you on the call?
Yes. Hi. How are you this today?
Perfect. Why don't you go ahead and ask your question to Van Jones?
Yes. This is a question that deals with how do we approach people on an individual level, and we've all got them, the relative who's on the Trump camp, the colleague, the friend, or something like that. How do we approach people we know without being confrontational to convince them to give up the Trump train and go with Hillary, even though the media has portrayed Hillary as this, incredibly corrupt, vile ogre? We have to do this two-sided job of convincing them that Hillary is the best choice, while convincing them Trump is most likely, if he gets elected, he is going to be the last president of the United States.
Well, what have you found has been helpful? I mean, you must have tried this. What makes a difference and what doesn't make a difference?
I find that, to be honest, I am finding that I'm having more success with being outright confrontational. I find that by telling people who are wearing Trump hats and flying the Trump flag, and people that I know, I use the fact that they are being un-American by voting for Trump, because Trump is the antithesis of every American value that we hold dear. So by putting them on the defensive and calling them unpatriotic, calling them un-American, that's something that they have cognitive dissonance with. But I find that, as confrontational as that is, I find that I am having more luck with that. However, that only goes so far. We need to have something else that we can use to bring them into the Hillary camp and away from Trump. Right.
Well, look, my track record on convincing people to move away from Trump is zero. So, I'm not the right person to answer that question. I hope I have a little bit better track record. There's a persuasion election, there's a mobilization election. I think we're in a mobilization election. This is my main fear. Listen, if you look at the Brexit stuff, they were absolutely right on the public opinion data, but they were wrong on the turnout data. In other words, the majority of people in Britain opposed Brexit then and now. But the majority of people who mobilized and who got off their butt and who went into those votes, it was the turnout modeling that was wrong. And my main concern is that the turnout modeling is going to be wrong, that liberals are going to be smug and confident and then not go the extra mile, to not forget trying to convert your right-wing cousin or your ex-girlfriend who's turned into a lunatic. No, don't worry about them. You got 5 people on the left who agree with you who aren't going to go vote because they love Bernie too much and they're disgusted with Hillary Clinton, or because they think we have it in the bag, and because they've got all their statistics and they're just going to bed with their statistics and their polls, and they're going to wake up in a nightmare. And so, rather than trying, for me, I apologize, I'm in downtown Oakland, so it's hard to avoid some of this loud noise. But rather than be in a situation where we're trying to figure out how to convert Trump people and turn them into Hillary people, I think the real danger is that the Hillary people aren't Hillary people, or won't bring 3 people to the polls, or won't, or they might send in a check, but they're not going to do what they did in 2008 and go to the swing states, or make all the phone calls. Why should I do that? He's a clown. He can't win. That's what I hear from every progressive, and I'm telling you, it is exactly the wrong way to deal with a threat like this. So I would say, keep being confrontational with the Trump people. I don't know if that's going to work for you, but I bet you got 10 progressive friends right now that are not doing everything they possibly can do to stop this guy, and you're going to probably be more effective getting them to take action and strong action than getting a Trump person to develop some sort of a moral conscience and rational decision making. And that's a big task. This is not the Wizard of Oz, trying to get a brain and a heart. That's too hard. I think we got to get our people to fight.
That's what a well-put statement. I mean, if you're voting for a bigot, you're already gone. The question is whether or not we're going to unite and beat the billionaire bigot, and the key to that is that we've got to mobilize our supporters, mobilize progressives. If we want to actually see the political revolution happen, it looks like our chance here. I mean, we'll see what happens at the convention, but it certainly looks like we're going to have a nominee of Hillary Clinton, and that means that we need to make sure that we can continue to fight for a political revolution that can actually succeed and get things done with somebody who is malleable, who can move. move. We've seen Clinton move throughout the primary specifically because of the political revolution, so we know it's possible. Whereas the difference is with Donald Trump, there's no movement there. The only movement is him calling in the police or his supporters to beat the crap out of protesters and send them out the door. That's not movement. That's dangerous demagoguery, and it absolutely has to be stopped. So I really, really love your point here. This isn't a persuasion election. This is a mobilization election. This is getting your progressive friends out to make sure that they vote up and down the ballot, but all the way up to the top of the ballot, too. Absolutely critical. Van, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be on this call. You said a lot of really important things. I found I was riveted with it. I think people were really interested in it. Is there anything you want to say here, right, just to wrap this up?
Well, look, I just don't think that people in DFA appreciate sometimes the critical role that you play. We have very, very few truly progressive organizations that are willing to engage in meaningful political activity. There's fine people that are protesting, and I love that. I protest every chance I get. They're tweeting and retweeting. I do that too. Posting, sharing, I do that too. But the reality is, until you have organizations like DFA that are well-funded, that are well-supported, out there doing the hard blocking and tackling to make a difference and to make progressive values matter, nothing happens. And so I hope that you feel rewarded by the impact that you've had as an organization. It was a huge deal to step forward the way that you did, when you did, for the candidate that you did. And I hope that this is energizing to DFA. Regardless of what happens with the Democrats, regardless of what happens with the DNC, the platform, don't let that stuff steal your joy of, if you had told any of us a year ago that 43% of Democrats would get out there and vote for someone like Bernie, we'd have said you're nuts. And yet here we are, and there's a lot to build on. But you can't build on it by yourself. You got to be a part of organizations like DFA. They didn't ask me to say this. I'm just saying I've watched this thing go down, and organizations like DFA have played an indispensable role and will play an indispensable role both in stopping Trump and in holding the White House accountable. And I'm just very, very proud to be a part of the conversation with you guys.
Oh, thanks so much for that, Van. I really appreciate it, and it seems like a perfect point for me to say, DFA members really delivered for Bernie. We raised over $1.8 million for him. We participated in over 115,000 phone banks, helping to make over 75 million phone calls, over 5 million knocks on the campaign that we participated in on a huge level. And, of course, we tried to do the best we could in the media to push back on both, wrong-headed attacks and to really, really push forward Bernie's positive vision for America. So appreciate the fact that you recognize that and calling out our DFA members for the incredible work that we've all done. On that note, I want to say that, one last thing. When it comes down to the fight at the convention, it's still important that we fight for the values that matter for us in the Democratic Party. And one of the things that we saw over the weekend is that part of that fight is that we really need to step it up on trying to stop the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So if you're interested in signing on and telling the DNC to stop the TPP, joining Keith Ellison and Bernie Sanders in trying to push the Democratic Party platform, don't forget to go to democracyforamerica.com and sign the petition so that you can get your name added in, so when we deliver it, we have an impact delivering it directly to delegates at the convention. With that, I want to thank everybody for participating in the call tonight, and I hope you have a great night moving forward, and we look forward to working with you tomorrow to make sure we defeat Donald Trump and elect progressive revolution candidates all up and down the ballot throughout the primaries coming up and then in November. Thank you very much, and have a great evening.